is something that classically was always kept in closed circles, always part of closed initiation traditions. But multiple spiritual traditions around the world knew about it and trained their own initiates in this type of science. Spiritual power spots are particular locations that have the BG3 energy, this balancing energy, naturally. These locations are cultivated by spiritual traditions all over the world. This particular slide comes from a German woodblock print of Saint Luiger. Saint Luiger is a Catholic saint who is connected to the building of the cathedrals. And he's shown holding two forms. One is the cathedral, and the other is a staff of authority that has a very specific geometric form to it. The top of the staff has this type of spiral movement that works as a type of antenna to receive and send energy. Although it's hard to see in this woodblock print image, if you look at the staff, there are small projections at different lengths of the staff. By holding the staff at different points that are marked on it, you can use the staff as a vibratory device, and at one particular length of the staff, you can isolate a wavelength that is connected to determining a specific vibratory quality, such as underground water, or the vibrational quality of what would classically be referred to as the quality of a sacred power spot, or another type of vibrational quality needed in the differentiation in finding a land location and correctly building a building that had the spiritual qualities to become a true temple or a true church. And so this knowledge from ancient Egypt actually spread in multiple directions. You can find aspects of it in the Jewish Kabbalah, in the Greek Kabbalah, and then moving into Europe with the esoteric research of the Catholic Church, and then later with the Jesuit order, which particularly focused on the knowledge of ancient Egypt. In medieval times in Europe, they did types of vibrational testing to find lines of energy in the earth. And these earth grid energies were classically used for demarcating specific vibrational qualities in a location, and also they would build sacred structures directly on the earth lines. The earth lines could be used either for placing the walls of the building on or the central axis of the building. And so this woodblock print shows in medieval times the dowsers of that time, vibrationally testing for where the lines of energy are running in the earth to plan out the city. In Dr. Karim's biogeometry work, a tremendous amount of detail has been developed, talking about the ways that we can detect these earth energy lines and the methods used in ancient times that have now been updated into modern methods to be able to build and work with these earth energies in the classical method of either developing a single building or actually shaping the energetics of entire neighborhoods, communities, or cities. This particular slide here looks at the way that in placing any type of sacred site, which in modern times would be a church in Europe, they would find a place that multiple energy lines come together that are running a specific type of energy. Again, this is an energy often referred to as the energy of sacred power spots. And one of Dr. Karim's accomplishments, as we'll mention in just a moment, has been to actually identify the specific vibrational quality of power spots. In this particular German analysis of this particular church, you can see that there are multiple lines of energy that are crossing at a particular location. The place of the multiple crossings of lines of energy is where they will place the altar within the church. And another major large energy line will become the central axis for the church. Spiritual power spots are particular locations that have the BG3 energy, this balancing energy, naturally, and these locations are cultivated by spiritual traditions all over the world. This is a slide showing the Sultan Hassan Mosque in Cairo, and Dr. Karim was working on the mystery of why does the mosque start, if you take a look at the slide, on one axis and then shift axis to a different orientation at a different angle. And he found the particular spiritual energy lines, the grid lines that they built the mosque on, that they were following the trajectory of these lines in the design of the building for the central axis and for the building of exterior walls. And again, this is classical knowledge that was done in the ancient world in many, many different traditions. Moving into modern times, the knowledge of how to actually test these specific vibrational qualities and to work with them is something that classically was always kept in closed circles, always part of closed initiation traditions. But multiple spiritual traditions around the world knew about it and trained their own initiates in this type of science. It began to break the surface with some of the information about the details of how this sort of work is done around the year 1900 in France. At that time, as we mentioned before, the Jesuit order within the Catholic Church had been collecting esoteric information from different parts of the world, and they were well known for collecting information, particularly from ancient Egypt. There were Jesuit priests who were trained to be missionaries, and they were sent to other countries armed with these particular vibrational methods. So around this time in France, a little over 100 years ago, there began to be books written with titles like the radiesthesia of the missionaries. Radiesthesia is the term used in Europe for sensitivity to or the ability to detect subtle radiations. And so the radiesthesia of the missionaries described the way that Jesuit priests were trained to be able to detect the vibrational qualities of the places that they were sent to. Because being sent to another place where you don't speak the language, no one knows you, and to try to convert the natives, you had to have practical skills. So with this vibrational science, they could do things like find sources of drinkable water. They could test what food was edible and what was not. They could find exactly what local plants would be medicinal for specific types of illnesses or health problems. And through that means, the Jesuit priests could be of tremendous help to the local population and be accepted and integrated into the local population. With the publication of these texts about the radiesthesia of the missionaries, there were particular texts also written by Jesuit-trained French priests, such as the gentleman you see in the right-hand side of this illustration, one of the most famous of these priests, whose name was Abbé Mermet. Abbé Mermet wrote a book called Je Père, which means how I work. And he was very well known in Europe for being able to use vibrational methods, not only to do things like find drinkable sources of water and underground minerals, but also to be able to detect the specific vibrations from any substance, find missing people, all types of things of this nature. And so it was around this time, 1900 in France, that a series of books appeared in French that described specific techniques for doing this type of work. And again, it was primarily written by Jesuit-trained French priests such as Abbé Mermet. With the work that they did, they were able to train enough people in France who were not necessarily part of the Catholic Church or part of any spiritual tradition, but simply independently began to research energies and to work with them. And this then allowed the rediscovery of some of the secret knowledge that had been embedded in some of the ancient sites of the world, particularly in Egypt, because the French researchers, which had gained thousands or tens of thousands of practitioners into radiesthesia by the 1930s, these researchers really focused primarily on ancient Egypt as a source for their knowledge, because they said that although many cultures understood this vibrational science, it was the ancient Egyptian temple science that had taken the work the furthest. And so with illustrations such as this, one of the people that pursued this work was a Russian named Kerner Skariatin, who wrote books under the name of Enel. And in this particular text, he looks at the specific rays of energy that are present in particular geometric forms. And particularly, he lived in Egypt, and he tested in the Great Pyramid and found a particular ray of energy that came into the Great Pyramid, not in the center of the pyramid, but at 6 degrees 15 seconds off of the center. That deflection is a particular ray of energy that was then used in the construction of the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, because the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid is at 6 degrees 15 minutes off of center. So using this knowledge, they're able to directly detect the specific vibrational qualities that these buildings were constructed to amplify or to catch for specific applications.